The glow of the open sign was a lonely lie. It flickered against the vast, inky blackness of the Texas landscape. A single tooth in a dark, empty smile. Nothing out here was open, not really. Not in spirit. My 2008 sedan, which had coughed its way east of Austin, was the only other man-made thing for miles, parked in the gravel lot of the Midnight Munch. A truly uninspired name for a place that was about to fund my very inspired and very expensive university degree. I pushed open the glass door, a little bell above it chirping with pathetic enthusiasm. The air inside smelled of stale bread, bleach, and something else, something vaguely like ozone after a lightning strike. Behind the counter, a man who looked like he'd been held together by caffeine and sheer panic was wiping down a surface that was already spotless. "Leo Vance?" he asked, his voice a nervous squeak. He was thin, with a slick of sweaty hair plastered to his forehead. "That's me," I said, trying for a confident smile. "Ready for my first shift." He offered a weak, trembling hand. "Marcus." "Day manager, look, I'm heading out, but a word of advice?" He leaned in, his eyes darting towards the shadowed corners of the shop. "The night shifts are different. Just listen to the others. Do exactly what they tell you." I nodded, chalking it up to first-day hazing. "Sure thing, Marcus. I can handle a few late-night weirdos." He didn't smile. He just swallowed hard and scurried out the door as if something was chasing him. The bell chirped again, a final, sad farewell. Left alone, I took in my new kingdom. It was a standard-issue sandwich joint, stainless steel counters, a sad-looking display of lettuce and tomatoes, and a row of booths upholstered in cracked red vinyl. It was in the back, by the massive walk-in freezer, that I found my colleagues. One was a girl with neon pink hair tied into two messy buns, bouncing on the balls of her feet as she refilled a soda machine. "You must be Leo." "I'm Maya," she chirped, her energy a stark contrast to the desolate quiet. "Welcome to the weirdest gig in Travis County." "Did you know some people think this place is a hot spot for ley lines? I'm more of a cryptid theorist myself." Before I could process that, a weary sigh emerged from a stool in the corner. A guy with dark circles under his eyes that looked like permanent bruises stared into a mug of coffee, as if it held the secrets to the universe. He looked exhausted down to his very soul. "That's Silas," Maya stage whispered, leaning close. "Don't mind him. He's just seen a lot of sunrises from this side of the window." Silas didn't look up. "Just keep your head down and slice the meats, kid. Easiest way to make it to morning." The mundane rhythm of the job took over for the first hour. I learned the precise fold for the sandwich wrap, the correct temperature for the toaster oven, the location of the extra pickles. It was boring, simple work. I was just starting to think Marcus was a drama queen when the bell on the front door chimed, but this time, it made no sound. A woman stood there, her presence instantly silencing the hum of the refrigerator. She was tall and ageless, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes the color of a stormy sky. She moved with a liquid grace that was utterly out of place amongst the cheap linoleum and condiment packets. This had to be the enigmatic manager. "Ms. Elara," Maya said, her playful energy instantly evaporating, replaced by a focused respect. Silas straightened up on his stool. Ms. Elara's gaze landed on me. It wasn't a warm or welcoming look. It was an assessment, a weighing of my worth. "Leo Vance," she said, her voice calm but carrying an undeniable authority. "You've met your team. You understand your duties." "Yes, ma'am," I said, slicing, toasting, cleaning. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "Those are your tasks. Your duties are different." She reached into the pocket of her tailored blazer and produced a small, folded piece of yellowed paper. It was thick, like parchment, and felt ancient in my hand. These are the rules of the night. They are not suggestions. They are not negotiable. Your safety, and ours, depends on your absolute compliance. Memorize them. I unfolded the paper. Written in an elegant, spidery cursive were 6 rules. They weren't about food safety or customer service. 1. If a customer at the drive-thru hums a tune, hum it back perfectly. Do not break eye contact until they leave. 2. The basement hatch is to remain sealed. If you hear 3 distinct taps, tap back 4 times. No more, no less. 3. Never look a shadow directly in the eye. Chloe. My blood went cold. I looked up from the list. A disbelieving laugh stuck in my throat. This was a joke. It had to be. But one look at the faces around me told me otherwise. Maya's expression was deadly serious. Silas stared at the floor, his jaw tight. And Ms. Elara's stormy eyes held a terrifying, unwavering certainty. "Welcome to the midnight munch, Leo," she said, her voice a low murmur that seemed to fill the entire shop. "The land is watching. Let's hope it likes what it sees." For the next hour, the 6 rules felt like a fever dream. I clutched the yellowed paper in my pocket, the sharp folds a constant reminder, but the world around me refused to cooperate with the madness. I sliced turkey, layered provolone, and argued with Maya about whether Bigfoot was more plausible than the Mothman. Silas remained a fixture on his stool, nursing his coffee like it was the only thing tethering him to this reality. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, each click a small, metallic sound in the overwhelming quiet. Then, the bell over the door chirped its cheery lying tune. A trucker, built like a vending machine with a beard to match, lumbered in. He ordered a foot-long meatball sub, extra cheese, and paid with a crumpled 20. He didn't hum. He didn't have strange eyes. He just wanted a sandwich. As I watched him leave, I felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost made me laugh. "See?" I said to Maya, wiping down the counter. "Just a guy. A normal hungry guy. That whole list is just some elaborate hazing ritual, isn't it?" Maya's playful smile was gone. She glanced at Silas, who slowly shook his head, his eyes dark. "The night is young, Leo," she said softly, "and it's rarely that kind." She was right. The silence that followed the trucker's departure was different. Heavier. The air grew thick and cold, and the fluorescent lights above seemed to hum at a lower, more menacing frequency. At 2:17 a.m., a low rumble broke the stillness. An old engine idling at the drive-thru window. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at my colleagues. Maya had stopped restocking the chip rack, her body rigid. Silas set his mug down with a soft click, his gaze fixed on me. This was it. I walked to the window and looked out at a beat-up sedan, its paint peeling under the sickly yellow light. The driver was a silhouette, a vague shape behind the glass. I couldn't make out a face, just a dark mass. And then it started. A low, haunting hum. It was a melody of discordant notes, a tune that slithered into my ears and made the hairs on my arms stand on end. It was wrong. It was a song that had never known sunlight. A shalat aracha. My throat went dry. Rule number 1. If a customer at the drive-thru hums a tune, hum it back perfectly. Panic flared in my chest. It was a prank, it had to be. But the look in Silas's eyes was pure, undiluted fear. Taking a shaky breath, I focused on the sound, forcing the bizarre sequence of notes into my memory. Then, I opened my mouth and hummed it back. The tune felt alien on my tongue, a violation of sound. I held the driver's unseen gaze, my own eyes watering from the strain of not looking away. For a terrifying eternity, we were locked in this strange, tuneless duet. Then, as abruptly as it began, the humming stopped. The engine revved once and the sedan pulled away, disappearing into the oppressive darkness. I leaned against the counter, my legs trembling. What the hell was that? A test. Silas grunted, his voice rough. "You passed." Before I could ask what I had passed, a new sound began. Tap, tap, tap. It was faint but distinct, coming from the floor near the walk-in freezer. I looked down and saw it, a square metal hatch, bolted shut and covered in dust. It looked like it hadn't been opened in a century. Tap, tap, tap. Clearer this time. Insistent. Rule number 2. The basement hatch is to remain sealed. If you hear 3 distinct taps, tap back 4 times. My mind screamed at me to run, to get in my car and drive until I hit the Austin city limits. But I was frozen. Silas simply pointed a trembling finger at the hatch. With my heart pounding in my ears, I knelt on the cold linoleum. I raised my fist and knocked. Tap, 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 tap. The sound was shockingly loud in the silence. I held my breath, waiting. Nothing. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the tapping, filled with an unseen, listening presence. Just as I was about to stand, Ms. Elara's calm voice cut through the tension. She was standing by the front door, having appeared as silently as a ghost. "Mr. Vance." "The salt." She gestured to a large canister on a shelf. One I'd assumed was for de-icing the walkway. A thin, unbroken line across the threshold of the front door. Now, I didn't question her. I grabbed the heavy container, my hand shaking so badly I could barely open it. As I poured a steady stream of coarse salt across the doorway, I could have sworn I saw a flicker of movement through the glass, a tall, spindly shadow detaching itself from the darkness beyond the parking lot. I slammed the lid back on the canister and stepped back, my breathing ragged. The white line on the floor looked like a ridiculously fragile shield against the vast, waiting night. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of hyper-aware silence. No more customers, no more taps. When the first hint of dawn bruised the eastern sky, it felt like a resurrection. As I gathered my things, utterly drained, Ms. Elara placed a hand on my shoulder. Her touch was cold, even through my shirt. "You followed the rules. You showed respect," she said, her stormy eyes studying me. "You survived your first night. The land accepts you." It didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like a verdict. Driving away from the midnight munch with the sun rising in my rearview mirror, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a job. It was a contract. And I was only just beginning to read the fine print. Sleep offered no escape. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that dark sedan, heard that discordant hum, felt the phantom vibration of taps from beneath the floor. My rational, university student brain, the one that aced logic and physics, was at war with the part of me that had poured a line of salt to ward off a shadow. The war was messy, and I wasn't winning. The next day, instead of heading to my macroeconomics lecture, I found myself deep in the university library's digital archives. I typed the sandwich shop's address into the search bar for the Travis County Chronicle. The results were sparse at first: property deeds, zoning permits. But as I dug deeper, a pattern emerged. A gas station in the 80s, abandoned after a series of freak accidents. A planned diner in the 90s, its construction mysteriously halted, its investors bankrupt. The land itself seemed to repel progress. Then I found it, buried in a local historian's scanned dissertation from 1972, an entire chapter dedicated to anomalous territories of Central Texas. The entry for my little patch of desolation was chilling. It spoke of a pact made in the late 19th century. The land, once sacred to a local Comanche tribe, had been violently seized. In a final act of defiance, a shaman was said to have bound the spirits of the displaced to the soil itself, cursing it for any who would try to tame it. They were not just ghosts, they were spiritual enforcers, guardians of a broken treaty. The author called it simply cursed ground. That night, the air in the midnight munch felt heavier than before. Armed with my new knowledge, the familiar smell of bleach and bread now seemed like a flimsy mask over something ancient and angry. "It's built on cursed ground, isn't it?" I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. I looked at Maya and Silas. Maya, who was meticulously arranging peppers into a smiley face, lit up with a morbid glee. "You found it. The Comanche pact of 1878. Some say the shaman's ritual trapped the spirits here, forcing them to protect the land from intruders. Which, is us." She said it with the same enthusiasm she might use to discuss a new flavor of chips. Silas just took a long, slow sip of his coffee. "Cursed, bound, haunted. Call it what you want, kid," he said, his voice gravelly with exhaustion. "All you need to know is the land remembers, and it doesn't like trespassers. We're just tolerated, as long as we play by its rules." His words hung in the air as the clock ticked towards the witching hours. This time, I knew what to watch for. My eyes kept straying to the front door, to the thin white line of salt I'd poured the night before. Around 1 a.m. I saw it. A figure was standing just outside the glass, where the gravel of the parking lot met the darkness. It was man-shaped, tall and still. But as my eyes adjusted, a profound physics-defying wrongness washed over me. The dim light from the open sign passed right through it, casting a perfect, uninterrupted glow on the ground behind it. The figure had no shadow. My breath hitched. Rule number 3. Never look a shadow directly in the eye. This thing didn't have one. Did the rule still apply? I forced my gaze away, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I busied myself wiping down the already gleaming prep counter, my back to the door, feeling the weight of that shadowless gaze on me. Then Maya gasped, "Leo." The counter. I looked down. The shadows cast by the knife block, the condiment bottles, and my own hands were no longer still. They were writhing. They stretched and twisted unnaturally, flowing like ink spilled in water, converging in the center of the steel surface. They were pulling together, deepening into a patch of absolute blackness that seemed to sink into the metal itself. They were independent, alive. "What do I do?" I whispered, backing away slowly. "Don't let them take shape," Silas snapped, his voice sharp with urgency. He pointed a shaking finger at a large bag on the bottom shelf. "The flour. Now!" I fumbled for the paper sack, tore it open, and without a second thought hurled a huge cloud of white flour over the counter. For a moment, the fine powder hung in the air like a ghostly veil. But it didn't settle evenly. It clung to something. The flour outlined a gaunt, skeletal hand with fingers impossibly long, pushing up from the steel as if from murky water. It revealed the horrifying contour of a face with hollow sockets and a silent, screaming mouth, a spectral form trying to tear its way into our world through its own shadow. The form recoiled from the flour with a silent shriek that I felt in my bones, and the shadows on the counter snapped back to their rightful owners. I stood there, panting, covered in a fine white dust, staring at the clean steel where a nightmare had just tried to claw its way through. The rules weren't just for survival. They were weapons. And I was only just learning how to fight. 3 nights in, and the fear had curdled into a kind of high-strung exhaustion. It was a state I now saw reflected, magnified tenfold, in Silas. The dark circles under his eyes had become chasms of sleepless dread. He'd started muttering to himself, his fingers constantly tracing invisible patterns on the counter. Sometimes, I'd see his lips silently forming numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4. "He's counting the shifts," Maya whispered to me as we prepped for the night, her usual vibrancy dimmed by a palpable concern. "He's on his 6th. People get weird when they get close to 7. "What happens on the 7th?" I asked, my voice low. She just shook her head, her neon pink hair seeming to droop. "You don't want to know." The answer, however, came looking for me. I was in the walk-in freezer, the hum of the fans a dull roar in my ears, when the temperature plunged. The cold deepened from a mechanical chill to a profound, unnatural frost that bit at my skin. My breath plumed in front of me, thicker than it should be. In the reflection on the polished steel door, behind my own image, a figure shimmered into view. It was a young woman, translucent and pale, wearing a faded version of our uniform. Her form wavered like a heat haze, but her eyes were clear and filled with a sorrow so deep it felt ancient. "You're the new one," she whispered, her voice a rustle of dry leaves in my mind. I spun around. The freezer was empty, but when I turned back to the door, she was still there in the reflection, her ghostly gaze locked on mine. "Who are you?" I breathed, my heart seizing. "Cora," the name echoed in my head. "I was like you. I thought I could just work here. But the land, it has a price." She flickered, her image struggling to hold. The 7-shift pact. On the 7th night the land claims one. It feeds on their energy, their fear, their life. It binds them here to strengthen the curse. My blood ran cold. Silas was on his 6th shift. "Ms. Elara," I stammered. "She protects us." Cora's spectral face twisted in something like pity. "She serves the pact, not the employees. She's a warden, not a guardian. She made her own deal long ago. Don't trust her promises. Don't let it claim you." And with a final sorrowful look, her image dissolved into nothing, leaving only the biting cold and my own terrified face staring back from the steel. I stumbled out of the freezer, the encounter leaving me shaken to my core. My chance to process it was stolen by the arrival of the knight's next test. He appeared out of the darkness on foot, a man who looked as old as the dirt he walked on. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles, his clothes worn and dusty, and he stopped just short of the salt line. He didn't look at me, but at the shop itself, with a look of profound confusion. "I'm looking for the old path," he rasped, his voice like grinding stones. My mind raced through the rules. This wasn't on the list. This was new. I thought of the history, the Comanche trail that had once been here. He wasn't asking for directions, he was asking for acknowledgement. "It's gone," I said, then corrected myself, remembering Cora's warning and Silas's advice to respect the land. "I mean, the new path was built over it. But the old path is still here." I pointed down, at the linoleum floor, at the concrete foundation, at the cursed ground beneath it all. "Underneath. It's always been here." The old man's gaze met mine. There was a flicker of understanding, a quiet acceptance. He gave a single, slow nod, then turned and walked back into the night, vanishing as if he'd never been. Again. It was the final straw for Silas. He'd watched the entire exchange, his knuckles white where he gripped the counter. "Paths, shadows, humming," he snarled, his voice cracking. He lurched towards the drive-thru window, his eyes wild with a desperate, cornered animal fury. "It's all in our heads. It's just a place. It's just a window." "Silas, no!" Maya cried out, lunging for him. But she was too late. With a defiant yell, Silas slapped his palm flat against the glass of the drive-thru window. The sound was dull, a simple thud of flesh on glass. But the reaction was instantaneous and horrifying. A web of black, crystalline lines shot out from his hand, racing across the glass like frost, but dark as pitch. Silas screamed, a raw, agonized sound, and yanked his hand back. Where his palm had touched the window, his skin was now covered in a black, frost-like burn. It wasn't a char. It looked as if the very life in his flesh had been frozen and killed, leaving behind a necrotic, crystalline pattern that was already beginning to creep up his wrist. Ms. Elara stood in the doorway to the back office, her expression unreadable. "He broke a rule," she stated, her voice devoid of all sympathy. "The land has marked him. The pact will be honored." The night after Silas broke, the rule was silent, eerily so. He was gone, with no explanation offered and none asked for. His stool in the corner sat empty, a monument to the price of disobedience. The black, frost-like mark on the drive-thru window remained, a permanent scar on the glass, impossible to scrub away. It was a constant, chilling reminder. The land had marked him, and now the land had taken him. Kunad. 2 nights later, Ms. Elara brought in his replacement. His name was Nate, and he was everything I wasn't on my first day. He was a bull in a china shop of supernatural phenomena, boisterous, overly confident, and armed with an arsenal of skepticism. He had a frat boy grin and a booming laugh that seemed to physically push back against the shop's oppressive quiet. "So this is it, huh?" he said, clapping me on the back so hard I almost bit my tongue. "The graveyard shift. Heard the pay was killer, no pun intended." He winked. Maya and I exchanged a look. "I'll be in the office," Ms. Elara said, her voice cutting through Nate's jovial tone like a scalpel. Her stormy eyes landed on me. "Leo, you will be his trainer. Show him the tasks." She paused, her gaze hardening, "and impress upon him the importance of the duties." Training Nate was like trying to explain color to a man born blind. He mastered the sandwich making with an easy competence, but he treated the supernatural elements as a series of elaborate inside jokes. When I showed him the list of rules, he laughed out loud. "This? Hum a tune back? Tap on the floor? Man, you guys have a whole LARP thing going here, don't you?" "I'm in," he chuckled, tucking the list into his back pocket as if it were a grocery list. "It's not a game, Nate," I insisted, my voice tight. "You have to take this seriously. People get hurt." "Relax, dude," he said, slinging an arm over my shoulder. "I get it, hazing the new guy. Don't worry, I can play along." Watching him, I was struck by a jarring realization. I was seeing myself from just a week ago, but through a new lens. His casual disbelief, his easy dismissal of the impossible, it was a mirror of my own initial skepticism. But now it looked like a fatal naivete. The mundane tasks of stocking napkins and wiping counters felt alien and absurd. A flimsy stage play performed over a yawning chasm of real danger. In just a few nights, this desolate sandwich shop had become my normal, and Nate's cheerful ignorance was the new insanity. The first test came, as it had for me, at the drive-thru window. The telltale rumble of an old engine broke the silence just after 2 a.m. I saw Nate's shoulders tense, a flicker of his bravado finally wavering. "Showtime," I muttered, stepping back to give him the stage. "Remember the rule." "Perfectly." Nate swaggered to the window, forcing a casual grin. The silhouette in the driver's seat was as indistinct as ever. Then, the humming began. It was the same chaotic, unsettling melody, a sequence of notes designed to fray the nerves. I saw Nate's confident smirk falter. He listened, his head cocked, and then he began to hum back. But he was off. It was a subtle mistake. A single note held a half beat too long, another sliding slightly flat. To a normal person, it would be unnoticeable. Here, in this place, it was a screech of chalk on a blackboard. He was imperfect. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. The humming from the car stopped. The engine, which had been a low rumble, roared to life with a deafening, guttural howl. The entire shop vibrated, the metal racks rattling and the lights flickering violently. A wave of intense, malevolent pressure slammed against the building, making the windows groan in their frames. It felt like the air itself was trying to crush us. Nate stumbled back from the window, his face pale, his eyes wide with a terror that was finally, horribly real. He had failed. The spirit in the car wasn't just testing him, it was angry. The humming started again, but this time it was distorted, laced with a furious, scraping sound like metal on bone. The black, frost-like mark where Silas had touched the glass began to glow with a faint, sickly light. "What's happening?" Nate shrieked, all his earlier confidence shattered. "You angered it," Maya yelled, grabbing a new container of salt from the shelf. "Precision matters." The lesson was learned, but it came at a price. The rest of the night was an ordeal. The taps from the basement hatch were thunderous, the shadows writhed with an aggressive energy, and through it all, Nate was a mess of trembling nerves. He had seen behind the curtain. He finally understood that these weren't quirky house rules. They were survival instructions for a game where the penalty for losing was absolute. And he had just shown the land that he didn't know how to play. My fifth night began with a declaration. As soon as I walked through the door, the air thick with the lingering residue of Nate's terror from the shift before, Ms. Elara met my gaze. Nate was already there, looking pale and subdued, wiping down counters with a feverish intensity, avoiding everyone's eyes. "Leo," Ms. Elara said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Tonight is your proving." Maya froze, a stack of napkins in her hand. Even Nate stopped his frantic cleaning, his knuckles white. The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. I thought of Cora's warning about the 7-shift pact. This was only my fifth. Was Miss Elara accelerating the timeline? "What proving?" I asked, my own voice sounding distant. "The land has accepted you. Now it will test you," she explained calmly. She walked past the walk-in freezer to the dusty, bolted hatch in the floor, the source of the rhythmic taps, the sealed door I was forbidden to open. With a quiet deliberation that sent a chill down my spine, she knelt and undid the heavy bolts. They slid open with a well-oiled smoothness that belied their rusted appearance. "The rules are for the servants of the house," she said, looking up at me. "But the land needs to know its master, or its prisoner." She lifted the heavy metal hatch. I expected a dusty crawl space, a set of rickety stairs leading to a damp basement filled with old supplies. I was wrong. What lay beneath the hatch was not a cellar, but an impossibility. An endless, starlit desert stretched out before me. The air that rose from the opening was cool and smelled of sand and dry sagebrush, carrying the sound of a whispering wind. The sky within that impossible space was a deep, perfect indigo, littered with a spray of brilliant, unfamiliar constellations. It wasn't a room. It was a place. It was the land itself, the cursed ground, stripped bare of the concrete and steel we'd built upon it. "Ina," Ms. Elara gestured towards the opening. "Go." My feet moved of their own accord, driven by a force I couldn't name. I stepped from the grimy linoleum floor of a roadside sandwich shop onto the cool, sandy earth of the spirit world. The hatch remained open behind me, a square of artificial yellow light in the vast, silent landscape. And there, standing under the alien stars, was Cora. She was more solid here, less a reflection, and more a sad, beautiful reality. The translucent shimmer was gone, replaced by a sorrowful substance. She looked at me, her eyes holding the weight of countless nights spent trapped in this place. "I warned you," she whispered, her voice like the wind that rustled through the phantom sagebrush. "She brought you here, to the proving ground. She will offer you a choice, as she offers everyone the land deems worthy." As if summoned by her words, two objects materialized in the air between us, glowing with a soft internal light. One was an amulet, a piece of dark, polished obsidian hanging from a leather cord. It pulsed with a steady, quiet power. The other was a single, iridescent black feather, so light it seemed to defy gravity. "The amulet of the warden," Cora explained, her voice tinged with bitterness. "Accept it, and you become like her. A guardian bound by duty, not by force. You'll serve the pact, manage the rules, and live a very, very long time. You will have power, but you will never be free of this place." She then gestured to the feather. "The feather of the bound. Accept it, and you become like me. Your energy will be woven into the land, a permanent part of its power. You will be a prisoner, another ghost in the machine, another warning to those who come after. A choice between being a jailer or a prisoner." My mind raced back to the rules, the strange, arbitrary list that had somehow kept me alive. They were a system, a logic within the madness. I thought of Miss Elara's words. The land needs to know its master. A master doesn't choose one of two losing options. A master makes his own. What if I reject both? I asked, my voice steady. Cora's sorrowful eyes widened in surprise. No one has ever done that. To refuse the land's gift, it would see it as an insult. It would unmake you. But the rules are about respect, I countered, a desperate idea forming in my mind. And what is a choice, if not a question? The land is asking what I am. If I accept the amulet, I'm a servant. If I accept the feather, I'm a victim. The most respectful answer is to tell the truth. And the truth is, I'm neither. I looked past Cora into the vast, silent desert. I took a deep breath and spoke, not to her, but to the starlit space around me. I am not your warden, and I am not your prisoner. I am a guest here, and I decline your offer. The world held its breath. The whispering wind died. The stars seemed to burn brighter. For a heart-stopping moment, I felt a colossal, ancient pressure bear down on me, an intelligence vast and impersonal, scrutinizing my soul. Then, as suddenly as it began, it receded. The amulet and the feather dissolved into motes of light and vanished. I had passed the test, not by choosing, but by refusing to choose. I had earned the right to face the final ultimatum, not as a servant or a victim, but as myself. I arrived for my 6th shift to find the midnight munch utterly transformed. The garish fluorescent lights were off, and the shop was bathed in the warm, flickering glow of dozens of candles. They lined the counters, sat on the tables, and cast long, dancing shadows on the walls. The air was thick, with the scent of melting wax, sage, and something else, the electric tang of raw power. This was no longer a sandwich shop. It was a ritual site. Maya stood by the soda machine, her face pale but resolute. Nate was nowhere to be seen. I suspected he had wisely run for the hills after my proving. The empty stool in the corner felt more ominous than ever. Silas was gone, well and truly. I could feel his absence like a missing tooth, a void where his weary presence used to be. The land had taken its due. The 7-shift pact, which I had narrowly avoided, had found another to claim. Ms. Elara stood in the center of the room, near the now sealed basement hatch. She was not wearing her usual tailored blazer, but a simple dark dress that seemed to drink the candlelight. The authority she carried was no longer managerial. It was priestly. "You have passed the proving, Leo," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the candlelit space. "You have shown the land a will it has not seen in a very long time. It respects that. So it offers you a final choice, the ultimate negotiation." She gestured to the front door, which stood open to the black Texas night. "The first option is release. You can walk out that door right now. The pact will be satisfied with Silas's departure. You will be allowed to leave, but you will leave it all behind. Your memory of this place, of us, of the rules. It will all be wiped clean. You'll wake up tomorrow thinking you quit a boring job after 1 shift. You can return to your life, unburdened and ignorant. For a fleeting moment, it sounded like a blessing, a normal life. No humming strangers, no writhing shadows, no cursed ground. But the thought of forgetting, of losing this terrifying vital knowledge, felt like a betrayal of myself, of Cora, of Silas. "And the second option?" I asked. "You stay," she said simply. "You take the amulet you refused before. You become a permanent guardian. You will help me maintain the balance, enforce the rules, and guide the chosen. You will be powerful. You will be immortal. But you will belong to this land forever. The jailer or the blissful amnesiac. The same false choice, dressed in new clothes. But I had learned from my proving. The land respected will. It understood rules. It was time to introduce a new one. I refuse both options, I stated, my voice ringing with a confidence I didn't entirely feel. Ms. Elara's eyebrow arched. "There are no other options, Leo. The pact is ancient." "Then it's time for an amendment," I countered, stepping forward into the center of the room. "I propose a new path, a 7th rule, negotiated here and now." A low hum filled the room, the same frequency as the entity in the car, and the candle flames swayed violently. The spiritual enforcers were listening. "I will leave this place," I began, my heart hammering, "and I will leave with my memories intact. I will not be your guardian, and I will not be your prisoner. I will not forget what has happened here." The pressure in the room intensified. The shadows on the walls deepened, coalescing into tall, featureless shapes, the spiritual enforcers of the pact, drawn by my audacity. They were the shadowless man, the presence at the door, the force behind the humming. They were here to reject my proposal. "The land will not permit it," Ms. Elara warned, her own composure finally cracking as she saw the enforcers manifest. "To leave with its secrets is forbidden." "That's where the new rule comes in," I said, my eyes fixed on the encroaching shadows. I remembered the flour, the salt, the tapping, the strange logic that governed this place. It was a system of exchanges and appeasements. Rule 7. A guest who has passed the proving may leave with his knowledge, but in exchange, he carries a token of the pact. He becomes a new kind of guardian, not of the place, but of the path to it. His duty will be to warn others away, to use his knowledge to turn back the curious before they ever set foot on this ground. He will serve the pact by keeping people from breaking it. It was a loophole, a clever twist of logic. I was offering to serve their purpose of isolation, but on my own terms, out in the world, avachiyahul. The shadow figures hesitated. They had no protocol for this. Their purpose was to enforce the existing rules, and I was using the very nature of their system to create a new one. I was using a rule to disrupt the enforcers. I had found a way to rewrite the contract. I held my breath, watching the dark, silent shapes. After a long, tense moment, the oppressive pressure in the room began to recede. The shadows bled back into the corners, becoming indistinct once more. The candle flames steadied. Ms. Elara stared at me, a look of utter astonishment on her face. "The land accepts your terms." I had done it. I had faced the final negotiation and won, not by fighting the system, but by becoming a part of it in a way no one ever had before. The ritual was not over. It was merely altered. With the pact's acceptance of my terms, the atmosphere in the shop shifted from confrontation to solemn ceremony. The candle flames burned with a steady, quiet intensity. Ms. Elara, her initial shock replaced by a look of profound respect, walked to the ancient cash register, a relic I'd never seen used, and opened a hidden drawer beneath it. She removed a small object and held it out to me on her open palm. It was a smooth, flat stone, dark gray and cool to the touch, no larger than a silver dollar. Carved into its surface was a complex, spiraling symbol that seemed to shift and move if I looked at it too long. It felt ancient and faintly alive. "Rule 7 is now sealed," she declared, her voice resonating with ceremonial gravity. "This is your token. It marks you as a guardian of the threshold. It will not give you power over others, but it will give you influence. A way to nudge, to warn, to divert. The land will lend you a piece of its aura, just enough to make the curious feel unwelcome, to make the reckless feel a sudden, inexplicable urge to be somewhere else." I took the stone. As my fingers closed around it, a faint, cold energy pulsed into my hand, a subtle connection that hummed deep in my bones. It was a chain, but one I had forged myself. I was bound not to the place but to a purpose. "What will you do now?" I asked her. "I will remain," Ms. Elara said, a flicker of something almost like weariness in her eyes. "The pact is eternal. There will be other nights, other employees. The game continues." My gaze fell on Maya, who had watched the entire negotiation with wide, unblinking eyes. She stood straighter now, her playful energy replaced by a quiet, determined resolve. "I'm staying, Leo," she said, answering my unspoken question. "I've seen what this place is. I've seen what's possible. Maybe I can be a guardian one day, the kind who chooses the amulet." There was a sadness in her choice, but also a strength I hadn't seen before. We said our goodbyes, not with hugs or handshakes, but with a simple, shared nod of understanding. We were two people who had looked into the abyss and had chosen different ways to live with the knowledge. I turned and walked to the front door, the carved stone a heavy, solid weight in my pocket. As I stepped over the threshold, away from the candlelight and back into the cool, pre-dawn air, I felt a subtle severing, like a rope being cut. The oppressive weight of the cursed ground lifted from my shoulders. I was free. But I was not the same. Time. I drove back to Austin as the sun began to rise, the familiar sight of the city skyline feeling both comforting and strangely alien. My apartment, my textbooks, my half-finished essays, they all seemed like props from a life that belonged to someone else. I slept for 14 hours, a deep, dreamless sleep that did little to erase the exhaustion etched into my soul. Life returned to a semblance of normal. I went to my classes, studied for exams, and hung out with friends who talked about things like sports and upcoming parties. I never spoke of the midnight munch. How could I? There were no words to describe the humming in the darkness or the shape of a hand made of flower and shadow. But my new duty was always there, a quiet hum beneath the surface of my life. A few weeks later, I overheard a group of students in the campus coffee shop, excitedly planning a late-night ghost hunting trip. They were talking about a deserted stretch of highway east of the city, about an old, abandoned sandwich shop that was supposedly a hotspot for paranormal activity. I felt the stone in my pocket grow subtly cold. I walked over to their table, a casual smile on my face. "Hey, sorry to interrupt," I said, letting the stone's influence guide my words. "I heard you talking about that old shop. I went out there once. Honestly, it's a total bust. Nothing but rats and peeling paint. And the foundation is so unstable, the county is about to tear it down. You're more likely to get tetanus than see a ghost." I saw the change in their eyes. The excitement dimmed, replaced by a flicker of doubt, then disappointment. Their grand adventure suddenly seemed lame and a little pathetic. By the time I walked away, they were already pulling up directions to a 24-hour bowling alley instead. I left the coffee shop, the stone in my pocket now inert and warm. The land was satisfied. I had fulfilled my part of the bargain. I was a guardian, not of a cursed place, but of the ignorant and the curious. I had successfully rewritten my role in a game that never truly ends, carrying my knowledge not as a burden, but as a shield for others.